I hate commercials on my playlist, but this is the free version, so I won't complain too much. And get me back here. Hello, thank you for joining me. Just trying to get, why is my mic? Okay, it's the one I want. I'm gonna start now. So, hello, happy Friday. This concludes week 3 of reclaiming my writing ritual. And today I'm going to recap everything that went on for this week, poetry that I read for the week, and today in particular, for those of you who are just starting out on your writing journey, particularly your screenwriting journey, I'm going to go over some basic formatting and vocabulary terms that you'll encounter when working on your own scripts. So I'll be going over that, and also how I use playlists for any of my WIPs, and the successes and failures for the week, and my plans going forward with week 4. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Nicole, aka Miss Ibis, and I'm a poet and I write Afro speculative fiction. And currently I am developing a Afro speculative anthology podcast for my my YT channel. And what I've been doing so far is I have the scripts for the first season for the episodes. And basically what they are, I've had pilot scripts and poems and short stories, and I've adapted a lot of that into episodes for the podcast series. So for week 3, it was a little chaotic this week. Monday, again, not the best day, but not as bad as when I first started out. I was trying to recharge my social battery because I worked a special election. I'm a volunteer poll worker, and I was trying to recharge my social battery in order to get ready for Tuesday. Now, this was a special off-season election, and the last one that I worked in the spring, we barely got any foot traffic, so I brought work with me, thinking we weren't going to be too busy. Well, we had nonstop people coming in, and there were constant lines going out the door, so I didn't get a chance to read anything, let alone work on any scripts or like take breaks a lot or anything like that. So we were very busy, which is good. But after Tuesday was over, I was exhausted. Everything hurt, especially my back. The chairs were a bit more comfortable, but there was a bench, and I had taken over one of the lines that was longest. It was closest to the door, and that's where a lot of the people were congregating. So I'm really fast on processing them, so I took over that line, and I was there until we finished getting those voters taken care of and everything. So we didn't leave until after 9 o'clock on Tuesday night. And by the time I got home, I don't remember, I didn't even bother turning on my air purifier or my fan. I'm surprised I actually had the energy to wash my face, but I went straight to bed and I woke up with a raging headache on Wednesday. So my body crashed on Wednesday, and I was supposed to stream that day, but I felt awful. I was still sore, and my voice from, talking so much on Tuesday needed a little break. So I took Wednesday off, and I kind of felt a little guilty about that because I really wanted to stick to my schedule. But again, I was tired and my body needed the rest. So, you know, I had to jettison that little voice of guilt and say, well, I have to take care of myself, and that is also part of my ritual. It's taking a step back and letting my body reset and recharge. So that's what I did. I was basically unconscious Wednesday. And Thursday, when I felt a little better, I played around with a few things. I was trying to figure out a different camera setup and how to stream using there's a Nintendo Switch here, and I was trying to stream a game that I had learned to play because I was talking with my sister, and we're trying to figure out how we can all play Fortnite together. So there's that, and then there's another game that I was surprisingly able to play. I think it's called Starlight Rail or something like that. Um, but again, I couldn't figure out how to get the console or the controller to um, to get recognized or work. So, I had to play around with it on my laptop. And I worked on changing my lighting setup a little bit, and I took my time. I read my poetry as usual. But again, Thursday, I wasn't rushing anything. My brain was still a little foggy, and now Friday, I'm more or less back to normal and have my self-heating tea mug. And my voice is back, and I have a little more bounce in my step, probably because it's Friday. And there are things that I I have chores, of course, but there are also things that I'm looking forward to doing. So um, there's a bunch of things up in the air. So for now, that concludes the recap of week 3 and the importance of allowing yourself to rest. And one of the reasons that sometimes writers can experience writer's block is that they are mentally burned out. Okay. And it's not as though you don't have an idea or you don't know where your story is going or something technical in that respect, but it's more a matter of your brain not being able to handle that creative heft and the weightlifting that's involved in focusing and bringing your full attention to your work. So it is, you owe it to yourself to kind of pull yourself back and take care of whatever you need and address like where that writer's block is coming from. Because a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, it's because you are mentally and physically exhausted. Okay. And you need to find a way to take a step back, recenter yourself, do something outside of writing and your work that replenishes you and nourishes you. Take a walk, cook something nutritional to eat, or buy yourself a pizza or something. Do something that you enjoy. Have some no money fun. Take up another interest that you have. Read, take pictures, do a drawing project or do puzzles. Anything that is not so much related to what you have to work on. And that can take some stress off of you. It releases your that dopamine drip that you need in order to keep that joy in your work. So that was a lesson for week 3, is finding a way to keep myself nourished and um, in a state of mind that allows me to be creative and focus on my work and not feel guilty about it if I have to take a step back. So hello, thank you all. Whoever's new here, thank you for joining me. For those of you who don't know, my name is Nicole, aka Miss Ibis, and I'm a poet and Afro-speculative fiction writer. And currently I am developing an Afro-speculative anthology series as a podcast for my YT channel. And I'm going through a kind of reclamation of practices that helped me become not just a more proficient writer, but a better one, and that helped me also enjoy the work more because for a while, I was afraid that I had lost that, and it began to feel a little too much, too heavy, more like a job that you had to go to. And that's not why I write. And I wanted to regain that intimacy with language and that closeness with discovering and playing around with form and structure and different ways of storytelling. So let me know in the chat if you are new to your writing journey and what you would like to see in your own work, and at what point were you able to understand, what do you want from your writing practice, and how do you let go of perfectionism and all of these things, and how do you start? So drop a like, drop a share, or a comment. I'd welcome any little hearts that you have to give if you feel free. And we're going to move on to the poems of the day, or the poets of the day. So Friday, I was rereading Shakespeare's sonnets. So I was in a sonnet mood today. And I discussed this early in week 1, how having a poetry background helped me when I transitioned into screenwriting, because I've only been screenwriting for, I'd say, about 5 years. And the thing about learning the format is you have to understand how to be very concise and not be too wordy, and understand, how to link your theme with the story that you want to tell. And coming from a poetry background, I realized that I was better equipped to understand how to tell the story in a screenplay form. So one of the things that I noticed was, the way you structure action sequences, the way you determine what parts, if you're going to use dialogue or not, and what parts should stay, how much exposition you should have in a scene, and when it is time to kill your darlings and cut off excess. And having that foundation in poetry helps me do that, because poetry deals in an economy of language. So there are certain forms that I tend to go back to when I'm recharging and trying to play around with how I structure my storytelling in a script form. So one of the forms is haiku. It's a very brief form, only 3 lines, where you have a specific syllabic limit. So for the first and third line, you can only have 5 syllables. And in the middle line, you can only have 7. So that forces you to create this really impactful image in a very brief space with a specific rhythmic tone to it. It has a certain texture. The words have a certain flavor and pacing. So it helps me when I want to evoke certain moods and flesh out my themes and scenes, and being able to cipher and sift out the most impactful bits of an action sequence or dialogue. Because a lot of the time, you can oversaturate your scenes with too much dialogue. And if you have too much, you're not really adding to your character's arc or your story arc. You're kind of weighing things down. So you pick and choose what reveals what you want to reveal about your character and your story. And, studying haiku allowed me to understand that a lot more fully. And with sonnets, sonnet has its own rhythmic structure. As I said, I'm, rereading Shakespeare sonnets that I got from the library, and I'm also reading Lucille Clifton. Um, they're like my go-tos when I'm thinking about sonnet forms, because it has its own rhythmic structure, and you have a lot more leeway as you would with a haiku form, but you still have to remain within a certain framework, and you still have to bring out that imagery and your metaphors and your word choices. Again, I have this thing about how words have this certain texture and taste to them. So when I'm rereading something that I wrote previously, especially when it comes to the dialogue, if the taste and the texture is off, that's my signal that that piece of dialogue doesn't belong there. Or that's my signal that, this scene could be a bit tighter, or this exposition doesn't necessarily need to be here. And things like that, that help you shape the way that, not just how it looks on your page, but how it translates into an audiovisual image. So that was one thing. And moving into that, I want to talk about how would you format your screenplay. And there are tons of resources available out there, and I would suggest you start at your library. But to give you a basic rundown, I have two scripts that we're going to check over. One is the pilot script for the TV series version of The Hot Zone. I think it was Ben Pratt who was in that, and somebody else, I can't remember. But there's that script, and there's also episode 8, I believe, of Misha Green's Lovecraft Country, and it's called Pika Bobo. So that's episode 8. So we're going to jump back and forth between those two scripts, and I'm going to go through what goes where, what's a slug line, and where your headings and transitions go, and all of that stuff. So we're going to start with the Hot Zone. Hi, welcome to the chat. Thank you for joining me. And again, for those of you who are just coming in, my name is Nicole, aka Miss Ibis, and I am a poet and Afro-speculative fiction writer. And right now we're going over the vocabulary terms and format of a screenplay. And this applies to whether you're writing a TV or series script or a feature film script. The only difference is if you're writing for a series versus a feature film, there are certain act structures that you follow. As in a TV script, you have more, say, you probably have maybe at least 5 acts in a TV script, and they're typically shorter than a feature film script. So feature film scripts usually have 3 acts, a 3-act structure within them. And, there are all kinds of approaches on how to begin with your story. But for right now, we're going to focus on format and the vocabulary terms that you'll encounter when working on your screenplay. So the first thing, we're going to start off with the pilot for the Hot Zone. And for the first page this is your title page. Oh, yay. And this is your title page. So you would start with the title and your name, the author, the date, and any type of inspirational information like what it's based on, or if it was inspired. Sometimes you'll see uh, like based on actual events or inspired by actual events. As a matter of fact, for episode 1 in uh, my podcast episode, it is inspired by actual events. So I would have that just below after the author name. And then you have other things like the copyright and when you wrote it. Sometimes you will see a set of information of how many drafts it's gone through. But for right now, we're just going to focus on that basic structure for the pilot. So if you go, I'm going to go further down here. So the Hot Zone was based on Richard Preston's book. And if you haven't read that, I really suggest it's nonfiction, but it's well, it is fiction, but it's based on actual events, and it's science fiction. It's a sci-fi thriller, and I like stories with speculative fiction. I like the ability to be able to blend different genres, especially, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and folklore and history. So this in particular, the series is, I think it would be considered a sci-fi thriller or drama. So that's the first page. Now here you have your opener. And it says teaser. You won't always have this. And again, it depends on your story and whether or not, otherwise you might have a prologue or something like that. But again, it depends on your story. It might not be necessary. It might be too much. It might be too much filler. So you won't necessarily have this. But your slug line is, this shows EXT for exterior. And you want to keep your slug line as basic as possible. So you're saying whether or not it's an inside shot or an outside shot. So interior or exterior. So this is exterior, and it gives you the location. It says Fields, Zaire, and then the time of day, or the time frame. So it's during the day in 1976. And you want to keep it really basic like that because you don't want to dump too much information in your slug line. Your slug line should be brief and to the point. So again, understanding haiku format helps you with things like this, like being concise and brief, because brevity is very important when it comes to formatting your screenplays. So that exterior, Fields, Zaire, day, in parentheses, 1976. That is your slug line. So further on, you have your description of your scene. Now, here, when you introduce a character for the first time, that character will always appear in all caps. Okay? And it's always when they first appear, not subsequently or anything like that. So whenever you are introducing your character for the very first time, that character will always appear in all caps. Just like here on the wings of a bird and so forth. And scrolling down, again, another slug line, because the scene changes from outside to inside. So instead of EXT, you have INT for interior. And this time, the interior scene is the farmhouse, Zaire, during the day, at same time, 1976. So you've changed from an outside scene to an inside scene. So interior, farmhouse, Zaire, during the day, 1976. And again, brief, simple, to the point. And you don't want to give too much away in your scene description, because there's action basically going on. And notice you don't have any dialogue or characters until a bit later in your scene. So again, when a character first appears, they are all capped. And sometimes, if it is necessary to the story, you'll go into a brief description of the character, like if they're tall, if they're old. For instance, Simon Jansen is in his 50s. Okay, that is a short, brief description to give you an idea into this character. So you would have something like that as long as it serves the purpose of your story. If it's not integral to your story, you don't need it in there quite yet, because you'll be able to reveal your character more through their actions and through how other characters treat them, view them, and how they interact with them. And you'll be able to flesh them out that way. And you want to make sure that your descriptions are, not stereotypical or problematic, but you're just giving basic information. And again, Simon Jansen first enters the scene. He is all capped in the action. And then here, where you have the dialogue where the housekeeper is speaking, the housekeeper is all capped and centered, and then below the character, you would have the line of dialogue. So here's the first line of her dialogue. And then you continue with the action as she moves throughout the scene. Because also bear in mind, you're not just stopping in place and having this bit of dialogue. You are moving, you are interacting with the environment around you as you are speaking. And you have to understand that kind of choreography between what your character is doing, where they are, what's being said, what's not being said, and also how their body is transmitting language through how they move throughout that scene and how they interact physically with the other characters involved with them. So that's something else you have to consider. And notice this scene doesn't have too much into it. It doesn't go into like a lot of detail that you would see in, say, a novel or a more in-depth story. It's the bare bones. And that's another thing about understanding these short poetic forms, is you are able to sift that out for yourself instead of having too much extra. So recapping, you have your title page first, where you have the title of your script, if you have a title. You might not have one when you have your when you're working on your pilot. That might come later. Personally, I kind of have, when I'm working, everything comes on at once. So when something new comes to me, the title comes first, and right after that, the story comes right after that. So I tend to always have a title when I'm starting out with anything. But it doesn't always work that way, and everyone is different. So if you have a title already picked out, you would have that on your title page. And then the author, your contact information at the bottom, and anything that the WIP was based on or inspired by, you would have that on your title page. And then following that, on your first page with the story, when the story begins, you have you're transitioning into your first scene, and your slug line tells you where you are, what's happening, and when. Who, what, when. So you're outside, exterior, EXT, or you're inside, interior, INT. And then you're given a brief description of where, like the field in Zaire in 1976. And that's pretty much all you need. Because as you go through the story, if your environment plays a larger role, that comes out through your action sequences and how your characters are interacting with that environment. That fleshes out more as you progress within your story. So, slug lines are the basic description of where this scene is taking place, where and when, and the time of day. And that's pretty much it. And next, when you change, it's like you will have, sometimes you'll see fade in or fade out, either in parentheses once the scene is done, or you'll have like a cut scene. These are transitions. And think of it how you create your TikTok videos. You'll have like a fade in, or like a swirl, a zoom in or a zoom out, a fade to black. These are transitional elements that move you from scene to scene. And they can vary. It's usually fade to black or fade in, or when you're doing a cutscene is more abrupt than a fade out or a fade in. But that's just transitional terms for moving from one scene to another. So that is the pilot script for Hot Zone. Now I'm going to go into something that's more established. This is episode 8 for season 1 of Lovecraft Country, entitled Jigabobo. Now I'm going to go back to the top. Now this is particular to Misha Green because the series was based off of a novel, as you can see, by Matt Ruff. And you have the title for the episode here. So this was for season 1, episode 8. The title was Jigabobo. And you have the authors, the writers' names, and directed and based off of the novel. And then you have the copyright information. Now, off to the side here, you will also see, as I mentioned before, the type of script that you're reading. So you'll have the particular phase. It'll be a production draft, your pink draft, your blue draft. It's like doing your first, second, and third draft. And there's sometimes there is also a list for all the, like I said, the revision list. So that has all of the drafts that have been published for a particular script. You won't necessarily have that if you're just starting out with a pilot script, but as you progress further with your editings, you will have different versions and revisions and edits of your screenplay, and sometimes you will see those listed after the title page. And further down, if you have actors already attached, you'll have a cast list. Even if you don't have characters attached, sometimes you will see a cast list that has all of the characters involved in this particular story. So you'll see, for instance, Letty Lewis, Atticus Freeman. Now, it doesn't mention the actors here. It just mentions the characters. And then you'll also have, sometimes you'll have what's called a set list. And this is all of the locations for your scenes, whether they're inside or outside. So you have a list of interior scenes and a list of exterior scenes. And then you have the scenes that were filmed in the vehicle, in the car, or Woody. So you have all of that in your set list. And that's a way to keep track of what you're doing, especially if you're working with your cinematographer and your film crew. You have an idea of, the type of lighting that you're going to need, the type of sound, whether you're going to be subject to the elements or not, whether it's day or it's night, if you have control over that, and all of these other conditions that can affect how you perform those scenes. You have that set list there. It's like your preliminary map of how your work is going to go. And not all of them have a set list, but as you progress and say it gets picked up, you will have one. So again, here in the heading, you will have typically, if it's a series or if it's a feature film, you'll have the title or the series title, the episode, and then the what stage it is, whether it's your pink draft or your blue draft. So this is the production draft, and that's pink, and it also gives the date. And here you start off with your slug line. So it's an exterior shot, EXT, Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ during the day. So you have the character who is first enters the scene, who first appears in the scene, Diana. And she is in all caps because that is her first appearance. So she's the first one. Her name appears in all caps. And it goes through a brief description of how she is as a character and how she presents as a character. She's confused. She's sad. She's bitter. There's sounds and people talking around her, but it feels muffled and far away. She's in her own daze because her friend is gone. Spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen it, but her friend is gone. And this is his funeral. He was another child. She knew him. They played games together. They had fun together. And he was a physical presence not too long ago. And now he was brutalized and killed and he's gone. And as a child, she has to process that. And the adults around her are not really emotionally available themselves in order to give her any guidance or much comfort. So you have this opening scene with her and just describing her whole body language, just giving a little glimpse into how she is going to be moving, not just through this scene, but through this story. And then you have other characters who are making their first entrances. The police officers, a man in doing the speech, the Nation of Islam man who's giving this fiery speech, the church women, and Mary, all of these characters who are first being introduced into the scene, they are all coming in all caps. So that's just one thing you need to remember. And then you have bits of dialogue here, and sometimes you will have parentheticals where there's an instruction on how a line of dialogue is delivered, and typically you try to avoid those because sometimes it can come down to like trusting the actors to deliver their lines, but sometimes it is necessary when you have multiple individuals within a scene and you are directing this line of dialogue to a particular person. So you would give that instruction, or something that is specific in the emotion that is necessary to deliver that line, and you want to emphasize that and communicate that to the actor who is portraying the character. So those are really instances where you would probably use a parenthetical. Otherwise, they're not really they're not necessary so much, but they're also a little bit frowned upon. So there's that to bear in mind. So if you're going to use them as sparingly as possible. Hello, thank you for joining me. For those of you who are brand new here, my name is Nicole, aka Miss Ibis, and I'm a poet and Afro-speculative fiction writer. And right now we are going over basic terminology and how to format a screenplay for either a feature film or a series. And right now, we already took a look at the pilot script for the TV series version of The Hot Zone. And now we're looking at Misha Green's Lovecraft Country, Episode 8. And we covered slug lines and how to format your title page and how to introduce your characters. So, slug lines are identifiers of where your scene is taking place and when. And it's a very brief description of where you are in your script. For instance, right now we started on the exterior scene outside of a church during the day. So it's EXT for exterior, and the location is Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ, and the time is during the day. And that is your slug line. And then the character Diana, her name is in all caps because she is first introduced into that scene. So any character that is comes into a scene for the very first time, they are introduced in all caps. And that's always. So when a character has dialogue, you have that character's name centered and then whatever dialogue right beneath it. And again, sometimes there's a tendency, if you're just starting out, to pump too much dialogue into a scene and it's not really necessary. When my one piece of advice to you is, first, without worrying so much about what to take out, when you're doing your initial rough draft, the point of the rough draft is to get everything down, is to get it all out of your head. And once you do that, once you have it completely filled out, mistakes and all, because your first draft is not supposed to be perfect. That's another thing we're letting go. So there's no such thing as a perfect first draft. Once you have everything that you envision your story to be, and hopefully you have like even a basic outline of your story. Once you have that first rough draft, then what you're going to do is you're going to let it, marinate for a little bit. You're not going to touch it straight away, because if you do, you're going to hate every single thing that you wrote. Every single thing. And you tend, and this is, my own problem. I tend to be my worst critic. But that's something you need to avoid, because you're not looking at it so much in an objective manner. This is something you poured a lot of heart and soul into, a lot of time and effort into, and you're not looking at it as just a separate rational piece of work. You're too emotionally attached to it, and you have that little voice of, is this perfect? It doesn't look perfect. Oh, all of these mistakes and everything. You're second guessing yourself. So you don't want to come into the second draft with that kind of mindset. So give yourself some time. Take a step back away from it. Let it sit, let it marinate for a while. And, do something else to take your mind off of it. And keep maybe a little notebook handy just in case something occurs to you about it later on. But you're not pushing yourself toward that. You're not rushing into it. And do something that you enjoy, or start another project, like start drafting another project. Maybe give yourself a week. If you need longer, take longer. But I typically, sometimes it's like, I need that week to step away from it and then come back and see what I've done with a fresh pair of eyes. And I'm not so critical of this wonderful mess that I just created. So if you're coming at it from that perspective, you're approaching your work, it's a lot healthier that way, and you're enjoying the process more. You had fun with it. This is your playtime. Your ideation and the rough draft, that is your playtime. I mean, they're all your playtime, but more especially during your rough draft. Because now that you've had that break and you come back to it, now you're coming back to it and you're refreshed and you're ready to, you can kill your darlings and not feel so terrible about it. You can, take out that bit of dialogue and not beat yourself up that, oh, this sounds terrible, this is awful, and crossing out every single thing with your red pen and making that entire page just a big red X. That's not the point. And you're missing, the good marrow that you have in there. You just have to sift a little bit more. So approach it from a calmer mindset. And that's how you can go back and reading it aloud to yourself, especially when you're acting out the dialogue for your characters. When you read aloud to yourself during that second drafting phase, you can tell, what's extra weight and what isn't, what attributes to how the plot flows or how your story flows, and your word choice, and, that, like I mentioned earlier, that taste and that texture of the words on the page and how that story comes to life for you. You will be able to have a greater sense of that as you are reading it aloud. And I've started the habit of recording myself when I do my live readings of my drafts, because I can go back and, uh, you know, do little tweaks or something. And it also gives me a greater intimacy with my characters, because during ideation, I have a tendency to interview my characters and do a bit of role play. So I'm able to, or hopefully, I am able to understand, is this really something they would say in this particular scene? Or is there a way for me to get rid of the dialogue completely and just rely on the action and how their body moves throughout that scene? Rely on their facial expressions. Are they tense? Are they angry? Are their shoulders hunched? Are they afraid? Are they trembling? Things like that. Their body language is communication. Their body language is also dialogue. So you might not need that spoken word, but their body and how they are moving can communicate um, a great deal within that scene. And the dialogue and the spoken dialogue wouldn't have been necessary. So that's a way for you to figure out for yourself, what am I keeping in this second draft? And, what can I leave behind? And you're doing it without, so much frustration and too much of a heavy-handed critical eye on yourself. You don't have to beat yourself up. Oh, this is terrible and whatnot. It's basically what serves the story. And if this piece of dialogue doesn't serve the story, I don't need it in there. If this action sequence is a little too wordy and too much, or if there's too much exposition here, I don't need it there. And you're not badgering yourself and belittling yourself or your talent. And, you're not taking that joy of that first creation away from yourself when you come to it that way. And that's something I had to learn, because initially I would do my draft and then read it immediately after. Like the minute I finished that rough draft, I was editing immediately after, and it never failed. I would hate every single word I put down, every single word. So I would have a 120-page script, and I finished that draft, and I jump right into it because I'm anxious and I want it perfect. It has to be perfect. So I jump right in And I look at it, everything, I hate it. I hate it all. I'm Xing out everything with my little red pen. I don't like the dialogue. I don't like this action sequence. I don't even like this title. And I go back and forth and I keep beating myself up over and over again. And that just sapped all the fun and the joy and the play out of this and the discovery and all of it. It was just a very sour experience. And I had to learn to pull myself out of that. And that's not easy to do. It's a habit like any other. And even if it's a bad habit, because it's so familiar, it's hard to let that go. It's hard to let go of what seems familiar to you. But that's one thing, over the course of these weeks that I have been, I've grown more accustomed to letting go of that rigid perfectionism for my scripts, or not just my scripts, but for whatever I'm working on. I'm for instance, I'm relearning how to draw. And one of the first assignments was we had to do an eye, and it seemed a little complicated to me because that would be the first assignment. I thought, I'd be starting off with something simple like a cylinder or, a pencil or something. No, the first assignment was I had to draw an eye. And I did. It looked horrible. I mean, it didn't look horrible. It looked like something I drew like when I was 3. But to me, it looked horrible. And, and I had to stop myself. It's like, come on. I'm just getting back into this. It's okay. It doesn't have to be, you're not, it's not going to be Picasso. It's not going to be a Rousseau or anything like that. It's not going to be perfect. I will get better over time. And once I had to keep repeating that to myself, because if you let perfectionism get in the way all the time, it weighs you down, it slows you up, and that can also trigger a type of writer's block in your head. And you get to the point where you get so frustrated and afraid of failing, you won't do anything. And I didn't want that. So I really had to make a conscious effort over these past few weeks to, kind of snuff that out. Whenever that tiny little voice of, that nagging voice that said, this isn't right, this isn't perfect, I physically had to stop myself and remind myself it doesn't have to be right now. That's not the focus right now. My focus right now is to, get this word count in. My focus right now is to draw this blasted eye. And I did. And, and just move on from that. Because that's one thing. And the more that I do it, I'll get better. Because I remember how I was when I used to draw. I used to be able to draw lifelike birds, and one class we had, the still life with the bowl of fruit and everything. I used to be able to do that. And, I can get back to that. It's just going to take time and a lot of practice. And, that's one thing. It's like understanding patience as well as, jettisoning that sense of perfectionism, and everything has to be done the right way the first time. So, I have to be more patient with myself. I have to be more forgiving with myself. And, other writers are the same. They have to be more forgiving with yourself when you are in your ideation phase, when you are drafting, because, it's not a punishment. The whole thing is, you don't want to alienate yourself from language, from the words, from the work, from the play and discovery and the genre bending and the experimentation. You don't want to alienate yourself from that, because that's the best part. Those are the juicy bits. One of my favorite things, it's not so much the actual drafting itself, it's more towards the ideation phase and the background information and coming up with storyboards and mood boards for my characters and developing playlists. I have particular playlists for whatever I'm working on, and that's the fun part for me. The writing, the actual drafting part is a bit more on the work side, but again, I still enjoy it because it's that connection with story and language and experimentation with form and um, just flavor and texture of words that I truly love about this craft. And learning to be more forgiving and more accepting of the messy bits and the spelling errors and the grammatical mistakes and the exposition and too much dialogue here, or something that doesn't quite fit, but it was in my head and I just put it there because I didn't want to forget it. Things like that. And I'm always careful because, again, even if I don't use something here, I also never throw anything away. And I never know, because there are parts, not the first episode that I'm working on, but there was another episode, I think it was the fifth episode. I had finished that draft and I had gone back to it for the second rewrite, and I had cut this. It was a character and their arc. I had cut that entirely because it didn't really fit with the story that I was trying to tell. But I didn't throw that away because that character became a whole new story and something else entirely. It grew on its own, but it just didn't belong in this particular episode. So I'm glad that I didn't shred it or anything like that. I kept it, and it wasn't so much that I wrote this and I hated it, it was awful, and I wanted to get rid of it. No, I was reading it over, and it just didn't fit in this episode. So I cut them out. But what spawned from that was an entirely new story that this character truly belonged in, that it fit, and their trajectory could go off in this unexpected direction. They could be fully realized. And I was so much happier that, I didn't completely chuck that character and I kept them. And, I'm grateful for that. But that's how these things work. It's, you never know what will come from even the messy parts that you create in your stories. So again, when you first do your drafting, when you're initially doing your first draft, write messy, write dangerously, experiment, write with fun, have a sense of fun and discovery, play around, um, keep that joy with you, because after that, you're going to feel so much lighter once that first draft is done. There's this, like, it's almost like a runner's high that I tend to get. And let me know if any other writers are in there. Let me know if this happens to you. But there's like this runner's high that I get whenever I have something completed and that draft is done, warts and all. It's the first draft. There are probably a dozen spelling errors and maybe too much exposition, too much dialogue, or what have you. There's stuff that won't end up in my second draft, but the first draft is done. And it's like that exhale that you take that just lowers all the tension in your shoulders and gives you that little dopamine rush. So that's part of that joy that I want to keep when I'm drafting, and not worrying so much about, there were so many mistakes in this first draft. I've got so much to cut, and this doesn't fit, and this isn't right, and I need to change this, and this, and that, and the other. I don't need to overburden myself with perfection anymore. And once I understood that and developed a way to train my train my mind to push that away and not allow that to overcome me completely, because it all stems from the same place. It all stems from fear of failure. That fear of, this isn't going to be right, nobody's going to read it, nobody's going to like it, it's total crap, I don't know what I'm doing. It takes you away from all of that. So once you shed that fear, you'll feel so much lighter when you approach your drafting process. And hopefully, you know, you came away with some helpful knowledge and some tools to help you, however or wherever you're starting on your writing journey. So drop some hearts and comments if this was helpful to you. And also, to recap, so we went over how to format your screenplay, doing your title page, how to form where your slug lines go, how to introduce your characters in all caps when they're introduced in a scene, and keeping your descriptions as brief and concise as possible, especially your slug lines, and how my uh, poetry background helped me with understanding what needs to be in there. What were the most important and impactful elements of my screenplay, and what was just extra and could be taken out. And not feeling so guilty or frustrated or down on myself that my first drafts were not perfect specimens of writing. I'm very happy that I'm able to let that go. And you know and it's not that it'll be completely gone, because imposter syndrome can hit you at any time, but at least now I have the mental tools that I can recognize it creeping up on me, and I can put the squash on that real fast. So that's the recap for what we went over tonight. And going forward, so this technically concludes week 3 already. And so for the 4th week, there are a couple of things that I want to focus on and try to be more consistent, especially with regards to my health. It's like I mentioned earlier, when I was working that election Tuesday, once we were done, it's like every bone in my body was killing me, and my back especially. So I would like to get back into my walking routine. I have a walking pad, one that I can like roll in and out if the weather's bad. But fall is a better season for me. Summer is not my time. I don't like melting. Summer is not for me. But fall, I love fall. Fall is my favorite season. And, I want to be able to get some air. My allergies are under control now, so I'm able to spend more time outside than I have ever been in years. So I want to take advantage of that while I have that window, because come winter, I'm not going outside in the winter. I don't like the cold. But winter's not my time. Autumn, spring is a close second, but autumn is my favorite. So I have that particular window, and I can enjoy it now, and without my allergies prohibiting me from spending some time outside and getting that vitamin D. So I want to be more consistent with not just the walking, but the exercise in general, and getting my muscles back and my back, because that Tuesday was brutal, especially on my back. So I want to be more consistent with that. And also play around with some cameras. I tried, like I mentioned earlier, I was trying different things with my cameras and my lighting setup. Um, I have limitations with what I can and can't use because my laptop isn't new. Nothing I have is like so much new per se, except like this I'm using this 4K camera. I got that off a TikTok shop and it was on sale. And I have the mics. These are new, but these are things that I could afford. And what little things that I could tweak, I did, like the mics and the headset. But also, I tried initially to stream a game that I was playing, and I could not get my computer to recognize the controller because it's a Nintendo Switch, and I the the HDMI cable didn't work for some reason. So I tried to hook it to. I have a larger monitor, but when I tried to hook it up, it didn't work. So that was a failure. And then I tried to get the controller just to work when I'm playing games on Steam, and it didn't work at first. But I watched an instructional video on how to do it, and now I think I got the controller to work on Steam. So I'm gonna try that because I was talking to my sister and my niece, and we want to try to set up something so we can all play Fortnite together. Because I just started it, and I still don't quite know what I'm doing, but I'm having better luck with that Star Rail character. I was actually able to fight something off and not die immediately. But yeah, we were talking about doing that together. So that's something I'm going to try. And still got the work to do. What I'm also planning on doing is I need to start crowdfunding for the podcast. I am reaching my limits with regards to memory and assets when I'm doing, because I have a lot of recordings and images and like video assets and sound effects and all of that stuff, and that is eating up my memory like nobody's business. And again, I don't have like uh, a lot of space on my laptop. My laptop is almost like 10 years old, and I have the Surface Pro here that I'm streaming on now. So I'm going to start crowdfunding for the podcast. And, basically so that I'm able to deliver uh, the best quality that I can. And I want to. I want to have video elements within it, and because there are animated sequences that I want to work on. They're in ideation phase, but again, I don't have the capacity to do that. It's like I'll need. I've been practicing with Unreal Engine and Unity and different programming languages, and I've been learning that because there are some things that I need to understand programming language more with that. But I'm going to need more storage space, more upgrade for my CPU, and other things. The space that I'm in, I have a closet here that would be a good recording space. But if I take everything out of that closet, then I won't have anywhere to put. I have lighting stands in there and cables that I have to sift through because there is no way that I have everything to use all those cables for. Some of those cables might be so old I have to throw them out, but I have to go through them and double check. So I will be crowdsourcing for the development of my podcast, and I'll bring up a more formal link or whatever at a later date. But for those of you who stuck with me for this entire session, thank you. Again, let me know in the chat if anything was helpful, if you have any questions, and where you are in your writing journey, and what rituals you personally developed for yourself that help you be as proficient and uh, that help you enjoy and maintain a steady level to your work. So I'm going to close this out. Ah, so I'm looking forward to my weekend, y'all. I hope you are too. And, take care of yourselves, be kind to yourselves. And I'm going to play around with my script a little bit more. And I have one scene to record, and probably maybe next session on when I do another stream on Monday, I'm going to go over uh, the audio visual format for a script. So there's a screenplay and then there's an audio visual script, and there's they can range. It depends. They can be really complicated or just really simple. And I started out with you have a line of dialogue and how long it takes, your sound effects, your transitions, all of that stuff, your breaks in between, and your intermissions, and there's like certain things that I had to learn when I decided I wanted to develop a podcast. But it was all just interesting, and I'll probably go over that sometime on Monday during the live stream, same time at 8:30. So thank you all so much for joining me again. Drop a like, drop a comment, or a share. Let me know how you're doing, what your plans are. Enjoy your weekend, enjoy the writing process, have fun with it, experiment, and keep that sense of play, because that's that's like part of the joy of this. It's like you have to hold that sense of play and experimentation and joy in your work, that love of language. And especially in this time and age, it's like why why make yourself suffer when it's not necessary? Why beat yourself up when it's not necessary? Your talent is there. Everything you need, you already have. It's just a matter of understanding that within yourself and bringing it out for yourself in a way that's most comfortable for you. So I hope the best for you this weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Take some air, take some time, whatever you need. And I will see you on Monday.